G'day everyone, my name is Jono. I'm one of the co-founders here at Astulte. And today I just wanted to chat about my experience going through our recent midterm audit. So, as well as Astulte, I also run an NDIS business based in Newcastle. We've been providing services to the Lake Macquarie and Hunter area for 8 years this year. And we've got 262 participants. I know that because of the audit. The auditor asked me that. And we previously had around 100 support workers. We're at about 80-ish at the moment. And I'm just going to chat a little bit about my experience in the lead up to audit. I'm going to talk about what the actual preparation looked like, what we did to kind of get ourselves sorted, make sure everything was ready. I'll chat about what the day was like. I'll talk about, I guess, how we did and our results as well. And then I'll chat about some handy hints as well at the end. So hang around until the end. Got some great stuff to share, especially if you've never been to audit before, that will really kind of put your mind at ease, make sure that you're ready, and can come out the other side with zero nonconformity. So let's get into it. So the first thing that we did is we looked at the NDIS standards, and we took this as an opportunity to basically do a self-assessment against the entire standards. So what we did, if anyone's looked at the NDIS standards before, it comes in a PDF document, with each of the, I think there's 20 something standards, 22, 23, don't quote me, look it up. And all the different indicators against those standards. So you might have one specific standard, and then there's a set of indicators. And essentially, what an auditor is looking for is those indicators are basically your evidence on how you've met that standard. So, what we did is I literally took the standards, I copied all of them, and then I put them into ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT to develop a spreadsheet with specific formatting because I'm lazy and I just wanted to speed this up. And I used that spreadsheet as the basis for our internal audit. So you could imagine a spreadsheet with a cell with one standard, and then next to it, all the different indicators to meet that standard. So my first thing was just getting this thing set up. Um, and then once we kind of had that, for each of the indicators, gradually what we did is we worked top to bottom um, for each of the standards. And I broke this up down the bottom. So, in a spreadsheet, you can have different tabs. We had different tabs for the different modules that we're getting assessed against. So we laid out, this spreadsheet basically, and then we went to work. So we kind of just worked top to bottom, and we really just looked at each and every single indicator, and we started just stacking evidence against each one of those. And then this happened over a period of months. It took a long, long time to kind of get all this information there. And by the way, we started this whole process 3 months in advance. And I know that people will say, like, you should always be audit ready. And I get that. But it doesn't hurt to do an internal audit. There's always going to be something that you'll pick up along the way. So you should have some sort of systems in place to be periodically doing these audits, by the way, if you haven't already. So that was our first kind of like, let's get this system together. Let's start auditing ourselves against the standards and seeing what evidence we've got. Now, we created a folder where all of this evidence would live, and then we hyperlinked it back to the folder. So come audit day, essentially what we were doing as the auditors going through the NDIS standards, we have got the evidence there so that if they say, how do you meet X standard? We are going back through ours, going through the spreadsheet, clicking on the evidence, and then showing the piece of evidence. So, you're going to have a lot of times where you might have evidence there, but they're probably going to want to see more things. So, like, an example for us is management meeting minutes. So, I had a couple there, but they wanted to see more. And I think they wanted to look at, say, 3 examples of management meetings of the actual minutes, I should say, as well. So They wanted to see 3 of those. I think I had 1 there, but they're all saved in the same folder anyway. So just sharing that with them made that a lot easier as well. So that was the biggest part of the process. It was just that information gathering, working with the team, trying to locate evidence, and it really was a team effort. And so I encourage you to get the team involved with this as well, especially when it comes to locating evidence. For example, there's one of the standards that talks about show evidence of working with providers and making sure that those providers are adequately qualified. So going back to the support coordination team, requesting that evidence, getting screenshots, redacting information in certain bits and pieces to give that evidence of, this person is qualified in, speech therapy or something like that. And then saving that in our evidence folder. And that was pretty much our process from top to bottom in terms of evidence gathering, auditing ourselves against the standards. And there was a lot of things that we could improve upon. So as a result of this internal audit, there was a lot of new systems and processes that we had to implement. The midterm audit is very much around like governance and operations. So one of the things that we did implement, we were looking at running a disability advisory board a number of years ago to get feedback on organizational policy and how we operate. For whatever reason, we didn't kick it off, but this was a good opportunity to revisit that, to assist in getting evidence to meet that specific standard on how do you ensure that there's opportunities for participants, stakeholders, and people with a disability to contribute to organizational policy. So, reading that standard, thinking about, hey, we would have met this a couple of years ago. For whatever reason, we didn't get to do it. So let's go back to it and let's kick that off again. So there's a couple of other things that we did as well. So chatting with people like Tanya Gomez, Sharon Floyd as well, and sitting down with them, doing one-on-one sessions, asking them questions about things that we're not sure. For anyone who is familiar with Tanya, I highly recommend doing some of her audit courses. There's a specific framework in there. It's called Define and Defend. If you can wrap your head around that framework, it's really about defining your interpretation of these standards and then defending it. So making sure that whatever you say that you're doing, it's backed by evidence. You've got something in your policy and procedure that talks about why you do it. You might have changed something, add it to your continuous improvement register. And so that you kind of have this well-rounded framework, if you want to call it that, and can defend against your interpretation of the standards. So highly recommend reaching out to Tanya. Shout out to her for that framework. It's made admin a lot easier because sometimes it just feels quite overcomplicated and quite burdensome having to get some of these documents. So if you can limit that, use that framework to your ability, and then prove that to an auditor, it can just make life so much easier. Now with Sharon, we worked with one of her auditors as well. We just sat down for some one-on-one sessions. So we paid them directly for some one-on-one coaching. And we had an opportunity to kind of show them where we're at, show them through our spreadsheet and kind of talk to them about this is what we've got so far. These are the things that we're a little bit unsure about. And it was an opportunity for them to give us feedback before the audit. So we kind of knew what we were in for as well. So I definitely recommend if you haven't engaged with someone, definitely engage with someone prior to audit just to make sure that you're covering all your bases. All right, so in the lead up to the audit, they're going to ask you for a couple of things. They're going to ask you for a risk assessment if they're coming on site. They ask you to complete a risk assessment just to make sure that the area is safe. If they have to visit multiple locations, the risks are assessed at each location. That no one is suffering from any illness or have any COVID or anything like that. So I think I had to send that back the week of. Participant sampling plan as well. They're going to request that. So that will look at all of your registration groups. It'll look at how many people you provide service to under each category. And generally you're going to be assessed on the square root of those numbers. So for example, if you've got 100 people that you do community access to under 0125 registration group, they'll look at the square root of that, and they'll want to talk to those people, and they'll want to review those profiles as well. So we had to send that through. Now, there's also generally they'll set up a Dropbox file or something similar where you can upload your evidence. So we had to upload all of our registers. Now, this is our midterm, so it's quite focused on governance and operations. So continuous improvement, incidents, complaints and feedback, risk registers, conflict of interest registers, staff files and documentation. All this stuff gets uploaded into that. And they actually review it the day before, because a lot of the stuff that this is what they told me. A lot of the stuff that they're doing and the reports they're writing is quite time consuming. So they like to have that earlier, rather than on the day off. So the sooner you can get that uploaded on your end and closed off, the better. So on the day of the actual audit, it was in our office. We had two auditors, and essentially one was doing the majority. I believe they were under supervision. So they went through all of the governance and operational requirements, basically, and went through all of the standards. And what we had planned to do initially is whoever was strongest at any given point in the organization or the business would essentially provide information or answer the questions around that. So Sarah and myself, who had done the audit preparation, we kind of worked on that and figured out who is going to do what initially. But I thought it was really helpful just having both of us there, just in case one of us wasn't sure about something, we could kind of help each other and back each other up, or say, look here, or go here, or if evidence wasn't in, we didn't have enough evidence in a folder, someone else could point to that as well. So I think that's a really important thing, is to make sure whoever's most familiar with your business is always in the room as well. And so the morning was, basically spent through going through a lot of operational requirements and bits and pieces, going through our registers, showing evidence around that, going through our risk registers, our feedback and complaints registers, going through any reportable incidents as well. So if we've had to report something to the commission, showing evidence of that, linking that back to case notes as well, making sure that everything lines up from the case note to the incident report to the reportable incident, and it matches the timeframes that the NDIS expects as well. So something important to keep in mind is just making sure that everything flows and your systems kind of capture everything in the appropriate time frame. And so the afternoon was a little bit more of evidence. We're actually going back through our previous audit, and we had two non-conformities there. So they wanted to make sure that the evidence that we had or that the systems and processes that we'd put in place since our previous audit were up to scratch, and that we'd actually learned from that. And I think that's a key thing to remember when it comes to audit, is that's what it's all about. It should be a process that you go through where at the end of the day, you can use it to get better. All feedback is an opportunity to get better. So use an audit like that. And they wanted to see that we learned from our feedback and we'd implemented systems and processes to make sure those non-conformities didn't happen again. So thankfully, they were only minor and they were super easy to fix. So we showed evidence of that as well as any opportunities for improvement. So they really wanted to see that anything that was an opportunity for us to get better at, that we'd adjusted and gotten on top of those as well. So, and while all this was happening, the other auditor was speaking with staff and speaking with participants. Generally, they talk about their experience with the organization. They talk about, especially with participants, if they had to make a complaint, do they know how to make a complaint? Would they feel comfortable bringing one up? Things like, have they gotten a service agreement? And things of that nature. So, yeah, the auditors kind of split up for the afternoon and handled both of those things. But overall, I think that the audit went really well. I think that the auditors, in my experience, generally, if you start off on the right foot when you're going through all this information and getting audited, that they start to see that you are implementing the correct processes, I feel like they let their guard down a little bit. So once I feel like they got a bit of a feel for the business, they were checking things, everything was matching up, they're starting to speak with participants and staff members. I feel like they were much more relaxed. It was like, okay, cool. Here's a business. We're not going to have to worry about them too much. Everything's working. Everything's in order. And I feel like they got a little bit more friendlier. And I've had the opposite effect of that as well. So for whatever reason, at our last audit, we were half an hour late. We didn't have the video link to join, and it just set up the audit for disaster, basically, or set it up on the wrong foot. And that's what you don't want to do. You don't want to set up the auditor on the wrong foot. You want to make sure that everything runs smoothly. I really went out of my way in this audit to make sure we are in a location which is very hard to find. So I wanted to make sure that they had all the details. It was very specific. Walk through this arcade. We're across from this business, up the stairwell to the left. Parking's here. It's paid parking. Don't park there. Park up the road. All that jazz. What's your coffee order? Everything. Shout out to Tanya for that one. So just really just setting the tone for a nice day. I feel like that's super important. Getting all your ducks in a row early, up front, just can really change the whole thing. And like I said, I've had the opposite effect of that, and it's done a real disservice to our audit. So good hint on that one. Just get everything in line, get it all done up front, make sure you're set up for a good day. So how did we do? We had 0 non-conformities, which I'm really stoked about. The team did an absolute amazing job to get us to that point. 0 non-conformities, 0 areas for improvement. I really wanted a best practice. I haven't got the final report yet, so fingers crossed. Who knows? We might get one in there. We'll see. If I do, I'll leave it in the comments or something. But yeah, really happy with that result. One area that I think they could have got us for, but they didn't, is in a service agreement, a participant gives you consent to deliver services, but we didn't have a specific blurb around consent for support. So we're going to add that to our service agreement moving forward. And some people are probably thinking consent for services, consent for support. Is that the same thing? Up for debate. You could debate that it's implied consent. Who knows? But we're going to add it to our continuous improvement register, and we're going to make sure that all of our new service agreements have that moving forward. And so one of the misconceptions I think about audit is, oh shit, I've got this thing that I got picked up on. I need to go back and do all of my service agreements. But the auditor said to us, just implement it from now and add it to your continuous improvement. You don't need to go back and create additional extra paperwork. It is an area that you could improve on, whilst not officially in our report. That is one thing they did mention to us. So we'll take that feedback on board. All right, so we said we'd talk about some handy hints at the end, and I kind of mentioned them already throughout the video, but I'll just drill down on them again in case someone skipped forward and wants to watch those. So yeah, I feel like the more organized that you are early on, the auditors kind of put their guard down. If you've got all your ducks in a row early and up front at the beginning of the audit. But if you start off on the wrong foot, the auditor will find something. They're going to start drilling down into like, okay, let's see what kind of business this is and what other strings we can pull. So I think that, just setting things up, being organized, being helpful to the auditor, setting the tone for the day, being friendly, building that rapport, answering questions, getting things right. It just really helps. Don't be half an hour late to a Zoom meeting with an auditor. Won't go good. Learn from my experience. Always have your team on standby. So like I said before, if you're unsure of something, make sure you've got your key players, your management staff in the room so they can help out. If things come up and you're not sure about it, if you need some assistance finding some evidence, maybe they've got some additional context in regards to an incident and why it occurred and how it occurred and things like that, because you really don't want to get in a situation where you're unsure about it and accidentally trip yourself up or not have the information there to provide the auditor to be like, this is how and why we did X. So lean on the team, make sure they're available, block out the calendars, don't have anything booked in the day. Just it's a couple of days. You just need your team available for 2 days, whatever it is. This is only a 1 day audit, but in the event of a 2 day audit, have them there, blocked out their calendars. So prepare well in advance. Look, like I said, again, in a perfect world, you're always going to be audit ready, but there is so much compliance in the NDIS that sometimes, unfortunately, you might have forgot to send out that feedback survey, or you might have forgot to ask them for their feedback on policy and procedure, whatever it is. Best thing to do is set up a feedback schedule, so you can just set and forget some of this stuff, and then you're just running it on repeat every single quarter, every single year, whatever it is. And then all these things that can slip sometimes, if you've got them just sitting on a schedule, regular, get them marked off, you can really speed that process up, and you don't have to worry about did I or didn't I do this. So last thing I'll mention, and this is something that we did as well, is setting up an internal audit schedule and then having different members of the team, whether that's like senior management, you might get a support coordination manager to do this, but delegating various internal audit tasks to members of the team. As we know, margins are forever, year on year, getting smaller and smaller when it comes to the NDIS. So you can't really afford to have a compliance officer on 100 grand a year, even though there's so much compliance to do. And maybe this changes at a certain size of business. I get that. But I'm really talking to teams of my size or less. It's really, really difficult and getting increasingly hard. So the more things that you can kind of spread amongst the team and have those responsibilities set in stone, don't have any shared responsibility, that gets messy, the easier it is to kind of stay on top of these audit things, and then just setting up that internal audit schedule so that it runs like clockwork and that you're forever doing the things that the NDIS expects to help you keep on top of the standards as well. So yeah, that was what I did at my midterm. That was my experience. I hope you guys found some value in that. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the channel where we put out more videos like this. Cheers. Hey guys, if you'd like access to the spreadsheet that I spoke about that kind of allowed us to gather evidence, store it in one location, it's got all the NDIS standards and all the quality indicators for each of the NDIS standards, not the 23 that I mentioned in the video, if anyone picked up on that. Don't know where I got that number from. Don't judge me. But download the spreadsheet, head to the description, and start working on your midterm.